today is on reading strategies. Um, we are recording these meetings, and they will be posted to the Accessibility Services YouTube channel that you can also access for future reference. And Carrie has been following up with emails with that link. So thank you all for joining us this evening, and I will welcome Deanna again. Thank you. It's been such, every session has been packed full of really practical information that it doesn't require a whole bunch of time to actually implement. And for me, that's really exciting because I can get overwhelmed just by the idea of implementing. So without further ado, this is Deanna. She is I'm not even sure how I would say it. She is my learning coach. And I'm excited to have her present this evening on those reading strategies. Thank you.
Awesome.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm so excited. After every session, I'm always so jazzed afterwards. Like, this is fun stuff for me to talk about. So I noticed we have some new names, which is great. And so I just want to encourage you to please ask questions as we go. I'm not going to reintroduce myself. We'll just save some time. Please ask questions as you go. I really, really, really find it super helpful if you are asking questions as we go. I think it's good for your learning. I think it's just good to have more of an organic conversation. Typically, when I'm working with students, I'm not just presenting. I actually never present to them. It's always a collaborative conversation. We engage in dialogue. And so I really, really encourage you to do that. So today we're going to talk about some reading strategies. And I'm going to kind of model a little bit more of that coaching, because as I was putting together the session, it was like, this is hard just to present on it. And I don't want to give you anything that you can just YouTube. I want to show you, and I kind of want to coach you through it. So fingers crossed I can get the technology working, because I want to show you a variety of ways to access reading material in post-secondary. Next week, we're going to talk about some writing strategies, which I'm super excited for. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so I've divided today's session up a little bit differently, a bit of an overview. We're going to talk about our purpose of reading. We're going to talk about accessing resources and tools that are accessible to us, kind of like what Carrie and I were chatting about at the very beginning of the session before we started recording. Sorry, everyone. But we were talking about, you know, kind of the first session that we talked about was like getting yourself ready and what do you have to do pre-term. And that's been a consistent theme as we've progressed throughout this series, is that you have to do stuff pre-term to get ready. And so we're going to talk today about what you need to do pre-reading to get ready. We're going to talk about continually engaging in the process of questioning. I'm going to show you how to survey what you're looking at, your resources, engage in some guided reading, extract that information from what we're reading. And I'm hoping to demo this for you with the document camera and also with a digital textbook as well. Okay, so that is the plan for today. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do when we're reading is we need to know our purpose. We need to know why we're accessing that material. Are we reading it for enjoyment? Are we reading it to complete an assignment, perhaps a research paper? Are we reading it? Corey, the session keeps cutting in and out and some of the information is being lost. The screen is fine. Can everyone else hear me?
Yeah, I'm not having any issues.
Okay.
Corey, maybe it might work if you log, like if you leave the meeting and come back in, maybe you can get a bit of a cleaner connection. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how your internet is.
Okay, so yeah, so we need to know, yeah, and Corey, if it doesn't work, you can always contact me and we can re-go over too. I'm happy to fill in for sure. Okay, so back to knowing our purpose. We have to know why we're reading a certain material. And so there's different purposes, right? So how I read information is going to depend upon why I'm reading the information. How I read Reddit is different from how I'm reading a news article for which I'm actually wanting to gain information, right? How I read a novel for enjoyment is different than how I'm going to read a novel if I was prepping it to teach some students when I was teaching high school. How I would read that in that material and engage in that material is going to be completely different. It's the same thing as the textbook. Are you reading it as your source of learning the material, as in the textbook is the curriculum? Are you using it as a supplementary resource? The purpose of reading it is going to determine the strategy that we're going to use and the engagement strategy that we're going to use as well. So that's really important. Are we learning concepts or are we just clarifying concepts? Are we just doing it strictly to gather research for a research paper? So how I'm going to engage is going to be completely different. And there's one thing I have to say, and I say this so many times. Stop reading the textbook like it's a novel. It's not a novel. Nobody reads these for fun. Some academics do. Most of us do not read textbooks for fun. We read it to gain information. So do not read your textbook from beginning to end. That's not what it's designed to do. That'd be like reading an encyclopedia from beginning to end. Who does that? So that is the number one thing. Stop. That's not how it's supposed to go. And I'll show you today how to read it instead, okay? Just for some reason, here we go. Okay. So first thing we're going to talk about, just like in most others and all the other sessions actually, is the stuff that you have to do ahead of time. You need to obtain the resources you're going to need ahead of time. This comes back to knowing yourself as a learner. What do you need to make the material that you are provided with accessible for you? Sometimes we need support making it accessible. For example, back, I don't know, like how many years ago has it been since I took a course at AU? Like, dare I say 20 years ago, maybe 18 years ago, when I took a course at AU, they would send me a textbook in the mail. And that's awesome. But if I needed additional support, like an audio version or access to like text to speech software, then I would need a digital version, right? So making sure that you have the material that you need ahead of time in order to access the material. So is your resource a digital textbook? And I've seen throughout the pandemic, just from working with students that are attending AU, that most of them are through VitalSource. If that's not going to work for you, what can you do to either make it work or to gain access to the other textbook? Some students, that could be considered an accommodation for them to be provided with a physical copy of the textbook. Other students, that might not be an accommodation and they'll order it off Amazon. And I notice oftentimes on the Vital link, there will be, or is it the Vital link or the course website somewhere, there will be a link for you to kind of order from the publisher a hard copy. If you need a hard copy, get a hard copy. For some students, they don't need a hard copy. They can work on a digital copy. For a lot of students, they can do that. If you're going to be the student that benefits from annotating, which I'll show you how to do on the digital copy of the textbook, and your laptop's not going to work for you, get a tablet. Get the resources that you need in order to be successful. I always tell students when I'm coaching them and we're looking at journal articles, my brain needs it to be printed out. So for me, I always make sure I have access to a printer or the printed material. And so making sure that you have all of that good to go ahead of time is really important. For my son, who's 13, he has a reading disability. And for him, just reading the textbook at school, not the textbook, the novel, say they're doing a novel study, is not going to be enough. So he needs to have an audio version of it. So on his cell phone, we just download Audible and he has access to his material so he can still be in class and he can still be engaging with his friends. Making sure we know what we're going to need, okay? And making sure that's super accessible. The other fun thing is, which I'll show you as we do this, is just having like a variety of simple low-tech devices around. Pens, highlighters. I like these ones that are erasable because as I'll show you, I like to write directly in the textbook. So having all this stuff ready is important, okay? And the tools that you're going to use are going to be specific to how you learn. And how you learn is going to change the more you learn about yourself as a learner and the more that you learn, okay? And the type of content that you're trying to access as well. All right. Okay. So let's talk about engaging and questioning. Okay, we're going to talk today about surveying the text, reading the material, reflecting, reviewing, that whole kind of circle of learning that we talked about last week. But when you're engaging in this entire process, you need to be engaging in questioning. So you want to be asking yourself, what is this about that I'm reading? Who is involved? When did it happen? Why? Where? Engaging in all of those questions are going to get you thinking about the information. Now, you won't need to ask all of these questions for all reading material. And this list can be somewhat limiting for some people. If it works as a scaffold for you, as a reminder in terms of to remind you to continue to engage in critical questioning as you're reading and engaging in the material, then use it as a scaffold. For some people, this might be limiting. If you can't look past, which is fine, if you can't look past like the who and you don't know what the who is and then you just give up, then don't use it. It's not a tool that's going to serve you, okay? But make sure that you are engaging. So you have to know your purpose, and you have to engage in that questioning. And so one thing that I always do is I put a sticky note or a little note at the top of my page to remind me what I'm looking for. This is very specific if I'm engaging in a research and I'm looking in academic articles for a research paper. I will have my research question at the top, or I will have the themes that I'm looking for information on a separate sheet of paper so I can pull out that information. So know what you're reading for, and I'll show you in a little bit of a demo in a bit here what I mean by that, okay? So just like when we talked about last week, the importance of surveying the course in order to come up with a plan and make decisions around how you're going to approach the term in terms of studying and learning material. Same thing for when you're doing reading. The number one thing that you want to do when you are engaging in reading is just in reading a textbook, let's say, first of all, is to engage in a survey of the material. You want to flip through, you want to figure out what the idea is about, what the text is about. This takes like, I don't know, like 5, 10, 15 minutes-ish. Just get a quick and dirty, I always say, overview of the material that you're going to be looking at. Then you do the same process with chapters or units within the text. Okay, so again, I always give the example of grade 8 science, when the teacher gives you the textbook and you get to do like a little hunt of the textbook. You get to look through and find different things and find the table of contents and the references and the vocab words and all that kind of stuff. Same kind of thing that you want to do. You want to engage in your own little treasure hunt of your textbook, okay? I apologize. So when you're doing this, you're going to want to think about things you already know about the topic. You want to make some connections in your brain. This is going to help you build a context of new information, okay? And then it'll be more likely for you to remember or be able to contextualize information for you afterwards. So when we're surveying, and I'll show you how to do this in a moment, we're obviously looking at the titles, any table of contents. We're going to want to look for bolded text features, some visual aids like some graphs or some pictures or some captions. Always the introduction, sometimes maybe the conclusion. And you can do this with any type of text that you're reading. It's really important with novels as well. For novels, you want to see how long are the chapters. Yeah, priming my brain, Lisa said. For sure, you're getting yourself thinking about it. You're getting kind of in the zone, all right? We all like things sometimes, I think. A lot of us like things to be predictable. We want to know what to expect. So before we watch a movie, what are we doing? We're often going to look at a review on the movie. Maybe we've seen a preview of the movie. It's the same thing for reading. Novels have, obviously, on the back, they'll have like a little bit of a preview of it, a bit of a description. Textbooks don't always have that. And so we need to take that time to look for it, okay? And know where to navigate our information. So, my friends, this brings me to the first demo, and I'm so excited. I do this with students all the time, one-on-one, but I never do it with a group. So though I say I'm so excited, I'm actually kind of nervous that the technology is not going to work, but I practiced it. So let's give this a go. So I want to do a digital textbook first, and then I'm going to show you with a physical textbook afterwards for a different strategy. So before we move on to the digital textbook, I have a horrible memory. My working memory definitely does not serve me as well as it used to, or I would like it to. And that's very common actually throughout life. And it doesn't always have to be like mine is, but the more that you've got going on, sometimes the more impacted your working memory can be. For me, it's very impacted. So even though I prepared this presentation, even though I do this stuff all the time, it just comes so naturally to me. One of the strategies that I use is, and this is very, very transferable for students, is on sticky notes, I make a little list or a little kind of little bullets of what I'm looking for. When I'm engaging in written material, I do this all the time. If I'm writing, perhaps I'm putting together a publication, I always have these little sticky notes with me when I'm prepping stuff. And so this sticky note is actually just this information here on survey the reading material. So I've got survey number 1. So if you needed to do something like this is a very, very good idea. You could either print this slide or make your own little note. When I was teaching junior high and high school, I used to do this on bookmarks for students with different reading strategies. I would teach strategies in isolation because there was a whole group, and then we would try them and embed them in our reading. So this is something you can definitely do. Again, do not waste time making it look pretty. We don't have time for that. Do that when you're not taking courses. But you can definitely just put it on a little sticky note, and that can be really helpful to your reading, okay? So we're going to get right into this demo. Okay, let me share my screen. I am going to be looking for you to confirm with me that you are in fact looking at the bookshelf here of psychology themes and variations. Can someone confirm?
Absolutely. It is on the screen. You nailed it.
Okay, so perfect. All right. So this is just one sample of a textbook. Yeah. So we have here, this is actually for Psych 289 and 290. I think this is the new version. I don't know. Anyways, this is just one sample textbook. And so when I'm going through a survey of this, legit, I'm going to walk you through what goes through my mind, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is, well, when I opened it up, it would bring me to, just a second here. It's going to bring me to the beginning. I'm just going to take a little survey through on the left here. I can click through. I can see the title. I can see the authors. I personally think it's overly important for me and my learning to know who wrote it at this level. But this is definitely important when it comes to academic articles. Then I just want to see what's available to me. And so navigating sometimes in a textbook can be really tricky. And so just going through and just knowing what resources are available. So there's a whole bunch of figures and table and then an outline of the content. So this is going to help me right here to know what's included in this textbook. All too often, we take the textbook as being the course, and the textbook most often is not the course. It's usually the material that's used to in Athabasca, sometimes just as the content that you're going to learn, but it's very rare that you're going to go through an entire textbook. And so this course, for example, or this textbook, for example, is for 2 courses, Psych 289 and Psych 290. And so you want to make sure that you are only reading the material that you need to read. And so looking at the contents and also double checking on your Moodle, what it is that you're going to be looking at. If it were me, I would be highlighting probably the chapters that I want to be looking at. So over here on the right-hand side, I'm not, this is not the way I learn. I do not learn from digital textbooks, so I'm not 100%, tech savvy with this, but I mean, it's pretty user-friendly. So I would be highlighting the chapters maybe that I'm going to be using or looking at in this course. Okay, so just engaging in this type of survey is going to be super helpful. So we've gone through the contents. This is a bit of an intro. Honestly, I usually don't read it. If I do, I will skim. It's going to talk about themes that might be important for some higher courses, I think. It gives you a bit of a visual. All of this is just in case you need it. It's just supplementary stuff. They show us that there's some test bank stuff in here that might be really helpful. I don't know this course specifically if it is, but there's definitely some areas to look for additional resources. Okay, then we go into the chapters. So when you click on each chapter, it's going to give you the breakdown of all of the headings in the chapter, which is super helpful, and we'll get to that in a minute. So this is the stuff we're kind of surveying before we start reading. And I would argue that surveying the textbook as a whole is really important at the very beginning of the course when you're determining your strategy. Okay, it can be really helpful when you're determining, like in your term at a glance, when you're creating that document. It can be really helpful to know what chapters are going to be substantially longer than others, or which ones are going to be a little bit shorter. That can help us plan out our time a little bit. So now, say we're ready to start reading. And we are going to, today our task is to read chapter 12, Personality Theory, Research and Assessment. So I'm going to go to that. Now, when I'm talking about surveying, when we get to the chapter level type of survey, I think this is the more thorough survey, but it's still a quick and dirty survey. So what I'm going to be looking at here is the big headings. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to say, oh, there's a concept chart. If I'm a visual learner, this might be a really good scaffold for me to have when I'm trying to map out bigger picture and parts of theories. So this can be really helpful, and that's a really fantastic resource that's included. So being able to just, survey and find that information, so you're not wasting time going to Mr. Google to find that information for you when it's already available. So the other thing we're going to look at here is just kind of scrolling through, and you're looking at things like the text features. Text features are these headings. The nature of personality here is a text feature. And it's also these subheadings as well. These are also text features that are important to look at. You can see I've already gone through and I've been highlighting a little bit in this chapter. I just wanted to make sure I knew how to do it for you. So I'll show you that a little bit more in a minute. But just doing a little scroll through, we're also going to look for things like if the chapter has goals or objectives. That's really important, or can be essential to our strategy. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Looking again for more visuals, just giving a little bit of a survey. This is really important before we start reading, so we know what we're getting ourselves into, and so we can just kind of be prepared. And it's just going to help us feel a little bit more calm about what we're going to be learning. Okay, so this is what I would do for a survey type activity. Okay, now is where I click back. Let's see, friends. Okay. I'm coming back to you. Coming back. Okay, what do you see now? Same thing.
We see you.
Just me.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Here we go. Thank you. We're going to go back to the presentation. Okay. Hold on. Okay, here we go. All right. Jump to where we were. Okay. Any question about surveying? Okay. We're going to talk about guided reading now. So as an educator, guided reading is a term. When I talk about it with my friends and colleagues that are working in the K-12 system, they think of like elementary, when you're sitting around a table and the teacher's like engaging in guided reading, which is like structured one-on-one or small group instruction on their reading, right? We're taking them through and breaking down the process. It's like basically the same thing, but for adults. So guided reading is really just taking you through a structure. And for kids, we have different scaffolds for them, and we have different reminders. We have cute little vowel songs, and we really teach them different elements of reading and different parts of it. Reading instruction shouldn't stop just because we get older. We still need to learn strategies to access material. And I interact with academic material all the time through my role as a learning coach, but also just through my academic role. And I'm not going to lie, sometimes it's like way over my head. But through effective strategy use, I can always find a way to access that material and figure out what it's talking about. Okay. And so that's what I'm hoping to show you a little bit this evening. Okay. Okay. The first thing I want to say is that all of the stuff we're going to be talking about is embedded with each other. It's not meant to be in isolation. And I'm also not telling you it in a particular order. As I'll show you, it's kind of a combination of skills. Okay. The first thing, actually, this one is like the first thing. This one's in order. There's just this one thing. Okay. Always use, or not always, if it works for you, but I think it works for a lot, use the chapter questions or the learning objectives or the preview questions, some textbook calls it, or even the course study guide to guide your reading. That's why it's there. So a lot of the courses I'm seeing at AU have like an actual study guide with questions. If they don't, that's okay. Majority of the textbooks do. And so that can be something that can help guide your progress as your progression, throughout the test. Okay, so that can be a nice little starting point. Sometimes we're like, okay, Deanna, you said don't read the whole textbook like a novel. Well, then how the heck am I supposed to read it? Am I supposed to go backwards? So we'll show you that in a minute. But just make sure that if you have access to that, you're going to put that, you're going to use that as a guide, okay? That's really important. If your brain needs you to put it into a question form, then put it in a question form and make yourself a grown-up worksheet. That's totally cool too if you're using it as a guide to access the reading, okay? So when you're reading, you're going to be scanning the information. You're going to be, and I'll model this in a minute, but you're going to be going through and scanning the paragraphs. Looking at the first and the last sentence is always really important, I find. The stuff in the middle that'll stand out will be stuff that's like text features, so subheadings and headings or bolded or italics text. So all of that stuff is going to stand out as you're skimming. So you're not actually sitting down and critically reading the first time. You're doing like a skim, okay? As you're doing that, when you come up to a term that you cannot pronounce out loud, I would argue that majority of the time you have no idea what that term is, okay? There are exceptions. When you're going through and you get to an unfamiliar term, figure out what that term is. Do not just skip over it, for goodness sakes, okay? A lot of people do that. Find out what that term means. If you need to look it up in the glossary, look it up. Oftentimes, the definition in the glossary is not going to help. So you need to maybe look up other words in the definition of the glossary. Maybe you need to look it up on Google. Maybe you need to find a little YouTube video that clarifies if it's a larger concept. But make sure you understand that word. It is very okay when you're reading, if that word still doesn't have meaning to you, for you to replace it with something that does, as long as it has the same meaning. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. When you're reading also, you want to be engaged in the creation of a summary. And you're going to want to go through, you want to go through the summary and you're going to want to engage in gathering the main points from that. I'll show you how to do that in a minute, okay? Now, doing that's not always easy. It's a lot of combined skills that are needed to happen. So that's when you need to bring in the additional strategies or resources. And maybe you need to read it out loud to yourself. I read out loud to myself all the time. Maybe you need to use like text to speech, where it's reading it to you, the computer. Some people are like, oh, but I can't stand the voices. They're getting better. The Australian one, and speed up the accent a little bit. It's totally doable. So just kind of like push yourself to try out different ways of accessing the material. There is nothing wrong with tracking while you read. There's nothing wrong with using a sticky note to track. I use a strategy with my pen, and I'll show you that in a minute when I'm reading to track. So please use those resources that are going to help you, okay? Okay. So while we're talking about guided reading, one of the things that you are going to be doing when you're interacting with the text as you're reading it is you're going to extract and record information. This can happen in a variety of ways. And the way that I do it depends on the material I'm accessing. It depends sometimes on my concentration and focus. It even will depend on my interest level in the material, okay? And my time. Let's be real. Sometimes we're on a time crunch. So when we're extracting and recording the information, there's many things that you can do to do that. I really feel strongly that the more that you are actively engaged in doing something while you're reading, the more you're going to be focusing on the material and hopefully comprehending it. Okay. So all of this is going to tie back to those note-taking strategies that we talked about. And it's not one specific marketed strategy. I'm not going to be like, here's the psychologist blah 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 approach. No, it's a blend of approaches. Okay. So when we always say like, I just remember it's junior high, I swear, junior high caused me trauma. Just kidding. Like in junior high, I remember the teachers being like, stop writing in the textbooks. We don't write in the textbooks. Do you know how expensive those are? Yeah, super expensive. Write in your textbooks, folks. Write in your textbooks. You purchase them. You have them. They're yours. Write in your textbook. If for whatever reason you do not have access to a textbook that you can write in, there is no reason why you cannot write on a sticky note and put it in your textbook. Or, let me reach over. I have my little box of strategy stuff. The other thing I say to students is you can go to the dollar store and you can get these like sticky tag notes, and legit, you can like highlight your material with them and then you can write on top of it. You need to interact with your material. Okay. So there's many things that you can do. So we're going to annotate the text. We're going to write notes. We're going to put comments. We're going to write questions in the margin. We're going to interact with it. We can do this digitally or on paper, however your brain is going to work. Then we're also going to want to engage in paraphrasing what we're writing. There's many ways to do this. You're going to do what's going to work for you, but you're not going to know what's going to work for you unless you try a variety of ways. So one of the ways is to write on a sticky note. And I often say to students, you shouldn't write any more for one page of text than one sticky note. If you're doing it effectively, I really don't think you should. There's always going to be exceptions, but no, for the most part, one sticky note per page, okay? Because you're writing in bullets and you're extracting essential information. And you're going to paraphrase. So you're not just going to copy and paste it onto your sticky note. You're going to write it in your own words. And I always say to students, imagine you're writing it like you are going to be in trouble for plagiarizing. Like your prof is going to look at your study notes and say, you plagiarized that guy. You can't copy and paste from the textbook. So you're going to try and rewrite it in your own words, okay? If writing on notes, which I'll show you in a second, just show you now. If you're writing out notes by hand, it's very okay. Well, they're your notes. Do what you want to do. I often would write like the page number in here to the textbook. This could be really good if you're studying for an open book assessment. But it's also really good when you're reviewing afterwards to be able to find the information if you need some more clarification. You're also going to write down any vocabulary words, anything unfamiliar, those technical words, and you're also going to figure out what they mean as you're writing them down. Nothing gets recorded out of the textbook unless you understand what you're recording. If you don't understand, you're not writing it down. You're taking a step back. You're looking at other resources. You're chatting with a friend. You're connecting with your tutor or your instructor. Okay? It doesn't get written down unless you understand it. That's my rule of thumb anyways. Okay? And then you want to just engage in that summarizing of it, which we'll talk about in a minute. All right? I'm going to give an example with a textbook. But it's the same for novels. Well, it's not the same. It's the same but different. Okay? For novels, one of the things I always recommend to students is to keep a character log. Keep a little side journal as you're reading, or a big sticky note. But like, have this one sticky note in the front. Do I have a novel close by? I don't. Put this one sticky note in the front and just keep a little character list of who they are, or on each chapter at the beginning of each chapter, and then just stick it right in the book if that helps you. And so just being able to pull out some pieces of information will help you. The other thing that helps you do, especially with novels, is sometimes we'll read a couple chapters and then we'll be like, I don't remember what this was about. So it's really good for testing your comprehension as well, okay? When I was in university, for my undergrad, I took education, surprisingly, and I had English as a major, and so I had to take three courses, 12 credits. Does that add up? I don't know, whatever. I had to take 3 courses of Shakespearean literature. Oh my goodness. I love going to Shakespearean plays. I love it, but taking all those plays was really difficult for me. So my anthology of Shakespeare's plays was like so written up. It was like totally like boxes, annotated notes everywhere. Like it's an artifact, really. So that's what I needed in order to gain that information from it. And so do what you need to do. Okay. I talk about annotating like it's no big deal, right? It can be really difficult to do. I'm not going to lie. Um, Underlining and highlighting are very common study techniques. And the purpose is to take parts of the text and make an item really stand out and to reduce the amount of material to be remembered, right? It also helps us focus. Unfortunately, many students make the mistake of underlining or highlighting way too much information. This can be overwhelming in itself because you have a whole page of highlighted material and then it no longer stands out, right? The whole page. So it can be really difficult to determine what to highlight, but I'm going to try and help show you what to do, okay? So I think annotating your text instead of highlighting is more effective. And so when you're annotating, you're actively engaging in the reading process. And it can help you isolate important information, which can therefore then help you comprehend it. And it's, like I said, also a really good strategy to help you focus and concentrate on the material that you're reading. So you're not daydreaming because you actively have to be there present and do something. And I always say it's not, but it kind of is like when you're a passenger in a vehicle. If you're not doing the driving, you might not learn how to get to a place. But once you're the one in the driver's seat and you're having to focus and pay attention, then you're able to better learn how to get to a place quicker, right? Whereas when you're just a passenger, you're daydreaming, you're checking your phone, you're drinking something, you're looking out the window, right? So you're more active when you're the driver. Same thing with reading, okay? So how to annotate. I'm going to tell you and I'm going to show you. So the first thing, again, is to engage in that skimming process. So you're going to skim that complete section or that whole paragraph first. And then you are going to read the section and you're going to underline, highlight, or draw boxes around keywords or phrases. There's no rules. There's no rules. You're going to do what works best for you. You can use the margin. If you're not comfortable, you can, or if you don't like that, or if there's not enough room, you can use sticky notes. I have really big writing, total elementary teacher writing, though I taught high school, but I have really big, large writing. It's neat, but sometimes it's too big for the margin. So for me, the sticky notes work really well. For others, it definitely depends on the person. The really important thing is to personalize what you're doing. Now, some people have an annotation system. I don't, because I wouldn't remember what they meant. I kind of just naturally I guess I have one, I just naturally form it, but I don't have like a legend of like, this is what this symbol means. But some people do. So if that works for you, you do you. So you can circle words that you don't understand. You can make some notes, draw some symbols, do what you need to do. Okay. Once you've gone through that process, or as you're going through that process, that's where you're going to write notes and you're going to extract. And I'm going to show you that in a second here, okay? So you might be writing the notes on a sticky, on a larger Post-it note in the text, or you might be writing the notes on a piece of paper, or you might be typing on a Google document or on just on a Word document. Or you're writing it in the margin. Whatever you're doing, you're engaging in that process, okay? So that's really important. Okay, before I do this demo, do you have any questions for me? Okay, we're either sleeping, watching Netflix, or shy. Just kidding. Okay, so the other thing I really want to say with the notes is when you've gone through this process of extracting information from your text, you then have your study notes for your exam. So once you've read your textbook and extracted the information, you're done. Don't look at your textbook again, unless it's a reference tool, okay? Focus your time doing this now. When I see students around midterms and finals sitting in the hallway at the university I work at, reading their textbook, I want to go and like sit next to them and help them out because it's so inefficient. It's not efficient. It's not going to help you. Okay. So there we go. So I'm going to, oh, wait, no, I have a little visual. So these are courtesy of the internet. Here's the link. I just found them. Annie's Study Corner had a really good visual example of annotating a textbook, and I thought it was beautiful. It's way better than mine, except maybe a little bit too much highlighting, but nonetheless, I'm not going to critique Annie here. I appreciate that she posted this. So you can see that she used a variety of tools. She used highlighters, sticky notes, underlining. She isolated vocabulary. She summarized on the sticky note. She used the margins, you can see. So she did everything that I talked about. Annie and I could be friends for sure. So this is really good. Okay. Mallory said that's the biggest thing for me. Definitely one of those people reading the textbook versus creating study notes. Totally, Mallory. I did that my whole first 2 years of university. I need to go back and do a redo. Absolutely. Took me forever to figure it out, right? It's more time consuming when you're reading initially to take the notes, but I promise you, you save that time afterwards when you're prepping for that midterm or the final. Okay. With that said, if there's no midterm and final, for some people, the strategy might not be to tackle it this way because you might only be reading your readings to answer your essay question. Not the best way, but for some people, that's what you need to do. That's part of strategizing your entire term. Okay. All right. Jocelyn, I want to see your question that you're typing because I'm going to be switching the screen to a document camera. We're going old school, and I won't be able to see your question. So I'm going to take a sip of my tea and, okay. Jocelyn says she struggles finding the information after though. So many tags and highlights. So I'm not sure if you're saying you're struggling with all of your highlighting and tags to find the information. Very common if you're over highlighting. When you're annotating, you need, think of it as like creating a resource for you. And what I often do is imagine you're like a teacher and you have to be able to find something quickly, or, you know, like you have to be able to kind of like find that information quickly for somebody. That's kind of how you want to approach it when you're doing it. When you're annotating, you're not just highlighting. Highlighting and annotating are not the same thing. Some people like to use a highlighter when they're annotating, but it's not your main tool. I would argue that well, for me, the pen is my main tool. This could be your main tool if it works for you, but if you're just highlighting the whole page, it's not working for you. Okay. And so this is something that like, it really does need the coaching in order to figure it out. So, you know, it could be through like us, like a learning coach, or, you know, it could be like, you know, someone in your family or a friend that's gone through post-secondary or someone else that's in post-secondary. You can kind of look at what they're doing, but it definitely is an art. Okay. One painting class doesn't make you Picasso. Just saying. One strategy class doesn't make you. Who's the equivalent of Picasso in the strategy world? I don't know. Okay. So now I'm going to switch my screen to my wonderful document camera. Okay. So I did this already today, so I have confidence in myself. Please, someone verbally tell me that you can see a textbook here.
You betcha.
Oh my goodness. Today is a good day. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay. This is a document camera that I had 10 years ago teaching high school when Edmonton Public didn't have a budget to purchase document cameras for us. So I've kept it on principle. And it still works. It's not perfect, but it'll get the job done. Okay. So what I'm wanting to show you here, and similar to the last time, I made myself a little sticky on the guided reading. As a learner, I might have this in my textbook to remind me. I might need that because when you're sitting down to do something new, it can be really tricky. Okay, so this you might need for sure, much like when you're making a recipe or making a dish that you haven't made before and you're using a recipe. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do, I've already surveyed. Now, this is the same chapter, you'll notice, from the digital textbook that we looked at. It's personality theory. I think this is an older version, but whatever. The material is the same. Okay, so I've already gone through the survey. I've looked through the different sections of the textbook. This is my introduction here. Nobody's got time for that necessarily. Not always, sometimes, but there's no text features in here. This is just going to give me some context. So if I feel I'm going to need some context to back up my understanding or of personality theory, maybe I've never engaged in this material before, I'm not sure. This is there for you to read if you need it, but I don't waste my time. I get right into my first heading here, the nature of personality right here, my very first heading, okay? You'll notice here to the left, there are some preview questions. Let me see if I can zoom in. Can I zoom in? So if it is helpful to you as a learner, and you know you, it's going to be a bit blurry, sorry. This might be the questions that you are going to use to guide yourself as you read the text. So the question, I'll just read it out loud. It says, what are the essential features of the concept of personality? Okay, and the second question is, what are personality traits? These questions always follow the headings, always. So there's a couple ways of well, there's many ways of tackling this. There's two main ways that I recommend tackling it. You either use these preview questions and you make yourself a grown-up worksheet and you are reading the textbook to answer these questions while also stopping at the text features, which we'll talk about in a minute. Or you skip the preview questions and you just make sure you go to each of the headings and you're going to extract essential information from there. Okay, now when I'm talking about extracting essential information, I'm talking about things like, in the heading here, it says defining personality, consistency, and distinctiveness. Okay, so I'm going to read that. I'm going to skim in this paragraph until I'm getting up to some of these terms. So for example, and I know I'm being mindful of time, but I really want to try and model this when I'm working with a student one-on-one, where I'm reading this whole thing out loud to them. But for example, this is what I'm reading out loud. Okay, so I'm going to read to you what I would be doing in my head. It's tricky to do, but I'm going to try. Okay, so I'm going to read, what does it mean to say that someone has an optimistic personality? This assertion indicates that the person has a fairly consistent tendency to behave in a cheerful, hopeful, enthusiastic way. Okay, well, consistency was up there. So I'm going to draw a box around consistent tendency to behave in a cheerful, hopeful, enthusiastic way. So that's what personality is. It's a consistent tendency to behave in a cheerful, hopeful, and enthusiastic way. Okay, so I'm going to annotate that information. Then I'm going to continue. Looking at the bright side of things across a wide variety of situations. Although no one is entirely consistent in behavior, this quality of consistency across situations lies at the core of the concept of personality. So the concept of personality is the consistency across situations. We're talking about consistency. Some people would even go as far as to like box this off and relate it back up to consistency. That section talks about consistency. So if you ever had to revisit this material and you needed to talk, like get more information on consistency regarding personality, you can look and you can see where to go without having to reread the whole thing. Okay, same thing, distinctiveness. I'm going to draw a box around that because it's going to connect right there. I'm going to skim down. I'll save you having me read out loud to you, but notice the beginning and the end of the paragraph. Each individual has his or her own distinctive set of personality traits. Then I'm going to the summary right here. In summary, in real life, I probably wouldn't have circled it, whatever. It's my textbook. I can do what I want, whatever's going to help my learning. In summary, the concept of personality is used to explain, number one, the stability in a person's behavior over time and across situations, which is the consistency, and two, the behavioral differences among people reacting to the same situation, distinctiveness. Okay? So whenever it's listing things in like 1, 2, it's important. Taking a quick glance over here to the 5-factor model of personality traits, you'll notice we have 1, 2. This information is going to be important. These are text features that we're talking about. Flip back to this introduction. There's no text features. We don't have time for that. If the author thought it was that important, they would have put text features in, or they would have put it into a format that's going to stand out to us. You'll also notice that all of the definitions are also bolded in a different color. Okay, so that's going to, as we're reading, that's going to remind us to stop and see its importance. Does that make sense? I'm assuming it does because I can't see any of you. So that's what we're kind of looking for in that. Now, for me, I typically like to read one section and annotate and then take my notes. So these are the notes that I would have taken. The colors have no reason except for that make me happy. And it makes it stand out for me. So chapter 12, I mean, I probably would have, made this stand out a little bit more. So chapter 12, defining personality, consistency, and distinctiveness. I have that right here. That's just this heading. If I wasn't using the headings to guide my reading, I would have had one of these questions. What are the essential features of the concept of personality? Well, the essential features are consistency and distinctiveness right here. Okay, so I'm taking the information. Consistent tendency is the core concept of personality. Each individual has their own distinct set of traits. I got this all right here. Okay, and then I get to the definition of personality. Oh, sorry. And then right here in the summary part, I've also pulled that out here. Personality can explain, number one, the consistency. Number two, distinctiveness. Okay. And then I had the definition of personality here. Then I would just continue on with the reading like this. Does that make sense? Now, I also want to point out when I got up to personality, I'm also going to pull out personality as a vocab word, and I'm going to do that as I go. And I'm going to put it in the definition in my own words on the back. The next one is personality trait. I did the same thing here. So as I'm going and as I'm reading, I'm creating my stack of vocab cards as well. I might not be able to sit down and read this entire chapter in one sitting, and that's totally fine. It doesn't mean that I have to wait in order to refresh my memory on the material until the next opportunity I have. I can then start using these cards as I'm going. While I'm making lunches, I can kind of quiz myself. While I'm catching the train, if that's what you're doing, or whatever it is, you can always have these with you to quiz yourself. Okay, so that is that piece of information. I cannot see you because I'm looking at the document camera, but does anybody have a question about this annotation while I have the document camera on? So I can maybe give you like a bit of a visual explanation. Okay, I'll take your silence as no. But I hope that someone was able, I hope this was helpful for you to kind of see this in this way. And I hope that you can see that it's like a variety of things that are happening. Oftentimes I tell students that, like, for me, it can be really helpful for me to listen to the audio version. Usually with a textbook, it's from text to speech while I'm doing that initial read. And I'll pause it as I'm annotating. That's totally fine as well. Okay. And sometimes even on YouTube, you'll find that people have uploaded chapters, read the chapters out loud, and they've uploaded them. So that's another thing that can be really helpful. Okay, I'm going to come back to you. Wait, hold on. Okay, can you see my presentation again?
Yep. We're
Okay,
just on
perfect.
page 1. Yep.
All right, so I didn't really figure out how to kind of do that. So, again, as with everything, after you've engaged in any type of strategy, or especially with reading, but you need to reflect. You need to think about what you've read. Yes, Melissa, the number points are going to be important generally, 100%. Yeah, I would argue that that's a text feature. That's something that's laid out in that way for you to access it. The other thing that's really common is when you're reading a paragraph, for them not to have it like number 1, 2, 3, they'll say firstly, second, in addition. I always circle that word. I would circle first. I know if I read a first, I'm skimming and scanning to second. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So I'm going to find first, I'm going to circle it, and I'm going to scan down in the text, and I'm going to find the second. And then I'm going to look for a third. They usually end it with like lastly. Okay. And I'm looking for that. And then in my notes, I'm going to put it in like number 1, number 2. I'm going to put it in that format. Okay. I find that really, really helpful. So thinking about what you're reading is the number 1 key thing. Then you're not done with this. I mean, if something's like, if there's too much, I hear this all the time in psychology, like there's so many like theorists, or in philosophy, there's so many philosophers, I can't keep straight who is who. Either can I, don't worry. Make yourself a scaffold. Make yourself that visual chart. The textbook often has it for you, as we saw earlier. So you can use that as a guide to make it your own, but visualize it and make it into like a concept map. That's really important as well for you to do that. So this is how you're getting the information out of the source, the textbook, in this situation. Okay. And then you can always tailor it. So if you're reading an academic article to complete a research paper and you're looking for specific themes, make yourself a table. And make yourself a table like one, and we'll talk about this for writing, but make yourself a table and have one column for like the article that you're looking at, and then have separate columns for the themes. And then you can like put the information in bullets, and then you can see who did what or whatever. Anything that you need to in order to organize that is really, really, really helpful. Okay, so you're going to make it your own, and you're going to find something that's going to work for you. And then while you're doing the reading, you might as well create the resource for the review, like the vocab sheets or the notes. This is why you want to take the time and have them legible for you. Okay. Sometimes I used to do this group study wise, legit. I would sit with a friend at Starbucks, and we would it wasn't Starbucks, it was second cup, doesn't matter. We would go through and we would do this together. We would be sitting around the table talking while we were doing it, and it was great. And then you're talking about it, you're engaging in conversation, doing what you need to do to make it happen. Okay. So we're 2 minutes over. I apologize. I'm not actually really sorry, but I'm just being polite because, again, take what you've learned and build it into your plan as a learner. Your goals don't have to be perfect. These are far from perfect goals I have up on the screen right now. So come up with your long-term goal. Maybe my long-term goal is to complete the course within the contract date. That's a very reasonable goal for a lot of people. Maybe your short-term goal, one of the steps that you're going to take to get to that long-term goal, is to improve your confidence in completing course examinations, and then maybe completing them on time. How are you going to do that? Well, you can use some reading strategies. You can extract highlighted vocabulary words from the textbook and use these cue cards as a study strategy. That can help you feel a little bit more confident because you're gaining the material, you're feeling like you have a purpose, you're doing it well. Maybe the other thing you're going to do is annotate the textbook. If that's a strategy you want to try and think it'll work for you, do it. Maybe you're going to incorporate text-to-speech software and try listening to it while you're reading it. That's awesome. Maybe you're going to use the textbook learning objectives or the study guide in order to guide your note-taking through the textbook. Okay, gathering that information. You do you. Find a way to incorporate something into your practice, into your goal setting. That is how you are going to show the most growth and be able to track it. And so that's your takeaway task. Same thing. Just come up with something. Come up with a brainstorm of what's working well, what could use a little bit of a tweak or an adjustment, and how can you learn the skills to make that adjustment. Maybe you're going to reach out for more support. Maybe you feel like you're equipped now. Maybe you're going to use a different resource, and that's okay. You just got to find out what's going to work for you as a learner. So friends, that's what I have for you. I hope that was helpful. And if you have any questions, like, now is your time, or you can email me after if you're not comfortable now.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
The course I'm taking right now has a commentary and like a billion articles. So there's no textbook, but there's article after article. So the articles aren't laid out like a textbook with points, important points, or like highlights of certain words or whatever. And so I have a question, sort of twofold. One, how do you know how much and what to read of those articles, and how do you annotate them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What was the second one? How do you what to them?
Annotate them.
Annotate them? I should have showed you guys an article too. I just would have been short on time. So kind of the same way, some articles do have text features that they'll have graphs or they'll have often italicized, but they often have headings. So you could use that, sorry, subheadings. You could use the subheadings in the article. For articles, I always say, I had a note on this, just a sec. Oh, I always say look at the summary and look at the abstract and look at the summary first. The abstract will give you the quick and dirty of what the article is about. And then it's knowing the objectives of the course. So it's very fair to ask your tutor, what are the like required readings and which ones are just extras? And then you'll have to kind of make the decision based on what's talked about. Maybe it's hard to know without knowing the setup of the course, but which common themes are going to be in the, what the course is. I don't know if there's a study guide, but in the like the layout of the course, the topics, the units perhaps that you're learning, and then make that decision based on which ones are going to fit in there. I always say take a look at the abstract at least, but abstract, summary, and conclusion are your best starting point, but it's really going to depend upon the depth that the instructor is looking for, and I think it's okay to ask that question from them. And then you're going to annotate in the same way. You're going to read through. You might not have as many text features, but the article is probably going to be a little bit more focused on one area rather than a broad overview of information. And so just kind of read through it, abstract, summary, conclusions, and look for kind of those key parts. And it also is going to depend, I know I'm probably not answering your question fully, but it's also going to depend upon the subject area as well. So trying to look for some specific structure to that could be really important. For sure. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Mel, you had a question?
I do, Deanna. Thanks. Good presentation. Oh, let me get my camera on, sorry, so you can see me. My question is about the skimming versus reading word for word and how it comes to tests that are multiple choice, where the test will ask for some crazy concept that was mentioned once in a 500-page text. Why do test banks do that, and how do we approach stuff like that?
Well, if this session wasn't recorded, I'd give you a different answer. But what the heck? The test banks are not always good. And that's the problem. In my opinion, 100% my opinion, that's the problem with 100, 200 level courses, where they're entry level courses, is it's just because the volume of students taking the courses, oftentimes what I see is that it's test bank multiple choice questions, and they're really electronically polled. And it's just not always great questions, to be honest. It's looking for direct recall. For students that have a wicked memory, that's great for them. They could read it once and be good. Oftentimes, those students that have that really good, strong memory aren't needing to engage in close reading strategies, to be honest. Right? So like, that's really tricky. I can say like, look for the clues within the question, do an elimination kind of process, use your background knowledge and your knowledge that you've gained in the course on the content, and try and like eliminate things. But it definitely can be really tricky. That's for sure. Yeah. Because I don't know. Yeah.
Sorry. I was using some of these strategies to study for a final that I wrote on Sunday. So I was like, okay, course objectives. If you want me to learn these 8 course objectives, I better know what they are. And some of them weren't asked about on the test. I thought, okay, well, this is bizarre. Why wouldn't we ask about the course objectives?
Yeah, the other thing we're finding too is that sometimes there's like such a big study bank or question bank for the exams, and they're pulling randomly, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's following an algorithm in terms of how many questions are in a certain area. I can't speak 100% confidently as to why that is. That's just my assumption. I do know that from my experience, the higher up you get in courses, typically there's less of that. And those kind of intro courses have more of it. But yeah, that's definitely frustrating, right? Like, yeah, it's definitely frustrating. I would always say it's important to ask if your tutor hopefully has the information, but I think it's important to ask your tutor or your instructor the breakdown. So what percentage of questions are going to be on this chapter, or what percentage are going to be on this chapter? I would hope that they could give you that information. It doesn't hurt to ask. That could be really helpful too, right?
That's fair. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Doris, articles, you may want to compare the articles and their references. You mean like find other articles from the other articles referenced within that article? Doris, I think that might be what you mean. That's a good research strategy too. I often recommend that to students. Find a really new article and then find out who they're referencing, and you can always go to that article too directly, find some information. For sure.
Right, it was in response to the previous question about so many articles. Because it's about one particular thing or one particular topic, you may see that in the references there's a repeat in the authors that they reference.
Yeah, no, that's fair too. Absolutely, there might be a repeat as well. Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, I hope that was helpful. I mean, honestly, friends, it's like a skill that's developed, right? Like it's not, our kids didn't learn to read in grade 1 just after one reading session. It takes time, it really does, and it takes trial and error. And what might be working one term, depending upon what's going on in your life or the content that you're trying to access, you might need to switch it up, and that's very okay. Part of learning, and that's part of the excitement and the joy of learning too, believe it or not. But I hope this was somewhat helpful. If you ever want any more information, you can totally reach out. I'll always do my best to support. Yeah, I hope that was good and I didn't cough too much. There we go, we're winning.
That was excellent. Thank you so much, Deanna. If there's no other questions, then I will stop the recording. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening, and a huge thank you, Deanna. It's always, I know when I first started in the post-secondary endeavors, I was a super highlighter. I mean, you could probably, yeah, there wasn't a whole lot that wasn't highlighted. It would be pages of highlighter. So where were you? You know,
I was learning too and figuring it out. Right? Because I used to highlight so much that my like hand would get all highlighted-y, right?
Yeah.
Or it would bleed through the textbook, like abandon the highlighter. Pen, man. Pen in boxes and circles.
Yeah. But I remember it took me a really long time that I know for me, the first thing I ever tried, because I realized like I'm just highlighting the entire book. Why am I bothering? I know I've just kind of figured, okay, I'm going to turn all these headings into questions. And if it doesn't answer these questions, then it doesn't deserve highlighting. So it sure cut back those highlighting lines and lines and lines of it fairly quickly. So, but great ideas. Love this. And thank you again.
Oh, you're very welcome. I look forward to next week and some writing strategy.
Yes, and so Carrie has been sending out the link for each session afterwards. Feel free to watch again, just even if you need that refresher on certain ideas. And hopefully we'll see you here next week. Have a great Canada Day.
See you, everybody. Thank you.